Hi, this is Alan Lamb. I'm the designer of Seven Deadly Sins, and I've made this video to give you a short overview of how you play the game. Alright, so what you're looking at now is the game set up, just after setup, getting ready to play for a four-person game. And a lot of this is hard to see on the video, so I'll give you some close-ups on some things here. Each player has 5 cards that are on card stands, and I'm not sure if you can see this, but you're looking at the backs of the cards here. You don't see your own cards. You see everyone else's cards, but not your own. The front of the card, here's a sample one. You'll see it has 3 attributes on it. Top one is one of the 7 deadly sins, in this case gluttony. The middle one is an amount that's either once, twice, or frequent. And the bottom is a type that's either mental or corporeal. In this case it's mental. So each one of the cards that the players have has one of those 3 attributes on it. And you got 5. And they're in card stands that are colored. I highly recommend you put them in the color that's on the score sheet. The score sheet has them in a particular order here. White, red, yellow, green, blue. And so that's the order I've put them in there. Putting them in that order will just make it easier to keep notes. In the center here, you have a rondel. It's a 7-sided rondel. There's 7 questions on it, on each of the sides, and in the center there's a special space called confession. And then you have attribute cards, and I'll give you a close look up at one of these. This is each one of the attributes. This one is wrath, but then you also have corporeal next to it. And you have a pawn. I don't know if you can see that very well. You have a pawn that starts the game right there in the confession area. All right. So here's how the game works. On your turn, the rondel's always going to move one position clockwise, and then you get to move the pawn. Now usually the pawn's going to be out here on one of these spaces here. So let's pretend it was. Then you get to move the pawn up to 1 space for however many sin you haven't confessed. And I know I haven't gotten into how you confess sins, but right now we have 5 unconfessed sins. So we could move the pawn 5 spaces, up to 5 spaces clockwise, or you can leave it exactly where it is. So let's say we want to move it 1 spot clockwise, and then we ask a question. Now the question is going to pertain to one of the 2 cards outside of it. Now 2 of the spaces don't have cards. So what do you do then? Whenever you come to a space that only has 1 card, you get to pull one of the outside cards and move it to this new position. So let's say we wanted to move twice over there. So now we've moved twice over there. And then we get to ask a question based on where the pawn is and one of the 2 cards over here. In this case, the question says, card from left. I'll go over how each one of these questions work in a second, but I want to get the overview of how you play the game first. Another thing you can do on your turn, after you've gathered information and you think you know what one of your cards is, you can move into the confession space here. And then you say, I know what my red card is, for example, and you list off the 3 attributes on it, the sin, the amount, and the type. If you're right, well, great. You'll mark that down on your scoreboard. If you're wrong, well, you got to get rid of this card and take another one and start over. And that's you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you got it right. And the game is triggered. The game end is triggered when one person confesses all 5 of their sins. Every other player gets 1 more turn, and then the game's over, and you count up scores. Scores go down. The first person to confess a sin will get, well, in the case of a 4-person game, will get 20 points. It's 5 times the number of players. And every successfully completed confessed sin after that gets 1 less than the last. So the next person would get 19, and then 18. And there's a place on the score pad here to keep track of that. One note, this score pad was actually built when I was thinking the game would be for 6 people, so it's a little bit off, but it's pretty close to what you'd get in the actual game. But you would mark on the 4-person game, the first person would get 20, and you would mark off the 20, and then the 19. You actually keep the score for your score on the actual card right here, and lots of places to take notes. All right, so I've changed views on you. This is a view that makes it a little easier to go through the questions. I've also probably changed cards on you, but that's all right. One of the things you get with a game is this little guide card that gives you an explanation on how all the questions work. But I'm going to go through them right now on how they work. So on the rondel, the first question we're going to talk about is card from the left. Now the order here matters, and from the left is always from the perspective of the player. Now keep in mind that the player is looking at the backs of these cards, but for demonstrational purposes we're going to show you the fronts here. So if the attribute card that was chosen was once, and we're seeing the card from the left, we start at the left and pick the first one that has once, and that one in this case would be the red card, well, the one with the red stand. That's what I mean when I say the red card. So if I said card from the left once, one of your opponents would indicate that it was this card right here. Now there's another question, very similar. Card from the right, and as you probably would have guessed, you're going to start from the right in that case and head over until you hit the first card that matches it. So in this case it would be the green card if I was asking about once again. First card from the right. Okay, now we have, let's go over here. It says player on the left. What you're going to do with player on the left is you're going to zoom out here. You're going to take a look at the cards that the player to the left of the, well, when the player to the left means the player to the left of the current player. And you're going to look at their cards and count up how many, I don't know, envy they have, if I was asking about envy, and then how many cards that player has of envy. And you're going to say that you have more, less, or the same number of envy cards as the player to your left. And as you might have guessed, there's also a player to the right, which is the same thing except with the player to the right. One of the easiest ones is count. If I asked about count and envy, basically I'm just going to count all my cards that have envy on it. In this case I have one, right there. And then the last two, which take a little bit more explanation, there's single match. The way that works is I'm going to pick one of my cards. Now remember they're normally flipped the other way, but I'm going to pick one of my cards and ask if my card matches the given attribute. So if I asked about envy, and this card right here, you would say yes, it matches. If I asked on this one, you would say no, it doesn't match. So I'm going to pick one of my cards and you're going to tell me if it matches that attribute or not. That's single match. And then the last one is double match. With double match, the way it works is I'm going to pick two cards, any two cards, white and yellow, or green and blue, whatever. And you're going to tell me not if it matches that attribute, but the count of cards that match that, the count of attributes that match that. So if I asked about envy on these two cards, you would say 0. But if I asked on these two right here, you would say 1. So that's the way double match works. Now there's actually a variant to the game, which is the way I actually prefer to play. It makes it a little more difficult and a lot more interesting, I think. Which instead of just picking one card off the edge here and choosing that one card, you actually use both cards. And all the questions work equally well when you pick both cards. So it makes it more interesting because it's kind of an either or. You get more less direct information, and it makes it a lot. The deduction gets deeper when you do it that way. And those are one rule I forgot to mention on the double match. When you're guessing these, when you confess your sins and you get one right, it goes down, and that card will no longer take place in any further questions. So when you're down to one card left and you ask about the double match, well, in that case you do just pick the one card. And that makes that double match is a lot more powerful when there's only one card, because you're getting a lot more concise information. And when you get the last one, that's the game. You tally up the scores and see who won. Well, that's pretty much it. I hope you get the game, and I hope you enjoy it.